Good morning. Welcome this morning. I think in the time change, we didn't change our thermostat timer. So we're going to need to work on that. But we'll just have to sing with gusto and get lots of hot air moving this morning to warm us up. So that'll be good. Welcome this morning. We had a festival day last week. We've got more seasonal changes coming, but today we get to hear a familiar lesson. A lot of congregations this time of year do some planning for financial work, looking at the end of the year and into the coming year, do a lot of budget work. I know a lot of congregations do a big fundraising drive and a big budgeting session this time, a lot of stewardship conversation. And Highland hasn't done that for a number of years, done a special dinner and drive and pledges and that sort of thing. But today's lesson reminds us how important it is to consider how we give back in thanksgiving to our faith. That God watches out for us and cares for us. And what do we give back? How do we express our gratitude, our thanksgiving? How do we trust God? You know, stewardship, the word steward actually means that you are responsible for all kinds of stuff. It's not, sometimes people think that when you give to the church, you give a tenth. That a tenth of what you have, a tenth of your income is God's. But actually, stewardship recognizes that all that we have is God's. And we are managers of everything. So the question is, what does God want us to give? Whether that we're talking about our time, or our finances, or our faith. How do we give to God? So we've got some challenging lessons this morning. Some lessons that make us think. Familiar story of the widow's mite. But we'll get there. We are gathered this morning on this kind of chilly fall morning. Pumpkins on the front step. Chill in the air. And we come here to say, God, what do you have to say to me? And that's hard to be open. We listen to the news, trusting in media to let us know what we need to know, but we come here with a different kind of question. God, you see more than human eyes can see. And you have a plan in mind beyond what we could possibly know. God, today we're here to listen to your news, to your guidance, to your leadership. Pray that we would all be open enough to hear it today. The Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, the 12th chapter. As Jesus taught, he said, "Beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect at the marketplaces and have the best seats in the synagogue and places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses for the sake of appearance. They say long prayers, and they will receive the greater condemnation." He sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. There was a poor widow who came in and put 2 small copper coins, which are worth even less than a penny. When he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." This is the gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. God's grace, mercy, and peace be yours this day through Christ, our Savior and Lord. I hope you go bankrupt. That was the kind of thing he used to say. Frank was a crusty old guy, a curmudgeon who used to walk the streets of the town and mutter under his breath. And he would say these awful things. But being a small town, everybody in town kind of knew who he was and dismissed him as being socially handicapped. That's just Frank. Frank was a member of First Lutheran Church there in town, lucky congregation. Like clockwork, he would come in just after the first hymn began. And he'd sit in the back row at the very end. And he didn't sing. In fact, he didn't even stand when everyone else in the congregation stood up. He'd just sit there. When it came time for communion, Frank would come forward and he'd take the bread and the wine, and then he'd walk straight out the back door. An unusual character. There was one day when the pastor happened to run into Frank on Main Street. He said, "Hi Frank, how you doing?" "I hope you get in a car wreck." Frank, "This is awful." You know, Pastor had had enough. I don't like hearing these things. These are awful things to say, and I wish you would stop saying them. But Frank just grunted and kept trudging down the street, mumbling under his breath. Well, the following week, the pastor got a call from Elfrida, an older member of the parish, and she was calling because she had just found out that her house had burned down. She'd gone over to a friend's house across town, and when she returned home, she discovered the volunteer fire department extinguishing what was left of her home. The pastor spent that afternoon securing a few basic necessities for Elfrida and getting her settled at her friend's house, and promised that he'd come back the next day to check on her. Well, the next morning when the pastor got to church, there was somebody there waiting for him on the doorstep. It was Frank. Oh man, I don't know that I have the energy for this today, the pastor thought to himself, but so it is. Morning, Frank. I don't have a great deal of time. Is there something I can help you with? At this, Frank reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Here, don't say who it's from. And he turned and began to walk away. Pastor looked at the envelope and it simply read, Pastor. And then Frank turned back again and said, oh, here. And he thrust another envelope at the pastor. This one was sealed and read, Elfrida. Frank then turned and disappeared. The pastor went into his office to begin the day. He sat down at his desk and he opened the envelope that was addressed to him. And inside he found a check made out to the church. And in the memo line it read, Help Elfrida. The check was in the amount of $15,000. Pastor almost fell out of his chair with surprise. Here was a gift from someone who had never contributed to the church before that the pastor was aware of, someone who seemed particularly antisocial, someone who lived in a rundown trailer. Where the heck did he get this money? The pastor was shocked. And then he looked at the other envelope on his desk, the one that was not addressed to him, and he wondered what in the world could possibly be in that card addressed to Elfrida. It had been such a difficult time already, she certainly didn't need any more trouble from the likes of Frank. But then there was this generous gift, and maybe he had had a change of heart. For the rest of the morning, the pastor sat looking at that card, wondering whether or not it was the right thing to give it to her. Well, after lunch, the pastor met with Elfrida at her friend's home as they had arranged. And in a very tired voice, Elfrida said, people have been so kind. Being a small town, word travels quickly, and I've already received several calls from people offering their condolences and asking how they might help. At this, the pastor reached into his coat pocket and said, when I came to church this morning, there was a member there waiting for me with this card for you. Oh, who was that? Frank, the pastor replied. Frank? She said. I don't know that I want to open this card, she said cautiously. The pastor chuckled and said, I've been thinking the same thing all morning, but I think you'll be all right. Elfrida opened the envelope. Inside she found a card with a picture of a bright sunset and gold embossed letters on the front reading, In Sympathy. She opened the card to see Frank's scratchy handwriting and read these words. I'm sorry about your house. I hope you can find what's really important in life. I'm praying for you. Frank. Her eyes welled with tears. After a long silence, she quietly said, I didn't think he even knew my name, and now he says he's praying for me. The pastor ventured, Elfrida, there's something else I need to tell you. This morning there was something else left for you at the church, a gift to help you get back on your feet. It was an anonymous gift for $15,000. Elfrida sat staring at the card she held in her lap with both hands, as though gazing into that sappy sunset, contemplating those gaudy gold letters would somehow make sense of the pastor's words. Again, after a long pause, she quietly shared with the pastor. In the card, it says that he hopes I find what's really important in life. All morning I've been thinking about those things in my house that were lost, those things that I'll never see again. And I couldn't sleep last night for that same reason. But somehow as I sit here and I'm holding this card, there seems to me nothing more valuable in the whole world. Pastor, I don't even know how I can say this, but I feel incredibly blessed right now. And I know God is watching out for me. I love these lessons for today, especially this our first lesson from 1 Kings, because there's so many different ways, so many different things that we can learn from this. The story about Elijah the prophet, and as Cicely shared, it was a time of hardship, and the prophet was on the run. And the prophet was doing his best to trust in God's guidance. God led him to some strange places. Just before our text that we heard this morning, God had said, "I'll take care of you." And Elijah said, "How?" And God said, "You'll have plenty to eat. I'm going to send birds to bring you food." And Elijah said, "Birds. All right, whatever you say." So sure enough, ravens show up and feed him. And he has enough to eat every day. But then the birds stop coming. He says, God? God says, "Yep, I got you covered, don't worry. There's a woman and her son out in this remote territory, so go check in with her, and you'll be fine." All right, whatever. So he's going to this remote territory. This is far away from the faithful community. This is out in foreign territory, on the northern coast, and this is the area where people would have worshipped different gods. They're not worshiping Yahweh. They're not listening to Yahweh's voice like Elijah was trying to do. They're praying to idols. Elijah would not have had a lot of companionship out there. He would have been seen as a foreigner, and he would have been rejected and kept at arm's length. But he finds this woman like he was instructed to do, and sure enough, he shows up and says, "So what's for dinner?" And she says, "Well, I guess I have enough to share, Here you go." And a lot of people hear this, that she shares the, bottom line, she shares the food, and isn't that great? Isn't she faithful? But if you look at what she actually says, she's not being especially faithful. She's not being especially trusting. She says, "Yeah, sure, you can share dinner with us. It's all we have, and tomorrow we're going to die." She's lost in resignation, and I would say depression. She is hopeless. I got nothing left to lose. Sure, why not? What's one more? Bring it on. She's not trusting God at this point, but God makes sure that she is cared for. And this is one of those great stories where, as the saying goes, you may not believe in God, but God believes in you. She may not pray to Yahweh. She may not be in the practice of prayer or going to temple or anything like this, but God makes sure, as she is caring for someone else, as she is sharing what she has, that she doesn't run out, that she has enough. She might be one of those people that you wouldn't expect to be blessed. She's not a churchgoer. She's not part of the people of promise. But that doesn't stop God from caring for her. And I think that's a beautiful thing. God uses any number of people to bless us and enrich us. And that's the other point of this story that I think is so important. Elijah could have said, "God, I think you're going to bless me through your people. I think you're going to bless me through my friends in the holy community. God, I know that the temple is the place where your blessing comes from. So I'm going to look to the temple." But instead he was out in the middle of nowhere. And first God used a bunch of birds to take care of him. And then God used this foreigner, this pagan woman, to care for him. And if Elijah hadn't been open enough to recognize God's work through these unconventional means, he would have missed the blessing. He would have missed God's work. He would have remained hungry. And the woman wouldn't have been included in the story. She wouldn't have had the chance to share with him and wouldn't have received God's blessing either. Through his openness to that unconventional leading, to that unusual kind of provision, lives are saved. But it takes us being open. It takes us listening carefully for what God might be saying to us. And it takes a lot of trust. So that's the prayer this morning, that we would be faithful enough to follow wherever God may take us. And we would say, "God, I'm listening for you, and you're taking me in a place that I don't understand. I don't know why you're doing this, but I'm in your hands." Pray that we would be open enough to receive, regardless of our assumptions or expectations. God doesn't work the way we assume. God doesn't work in ways that we necessarily even understand. But our part is to listen, to trust, to be generous enough that we know that God will make sure that we don't run out. God will care for us and see us through. And as says, may we always know what is most